I want to start the review by first off saying that I'm not a big fan of musicals. I'm not saying I hate all of them. There's a few that I do like, such as Grease and some of the comedy ones. And I definitely love those classic Disney animated musicals, like The Lion King and stuff like that, because those are animated classics, but they still count as being musicals. But musicals is probably my least favorite film genre. So when the story came out, God, it feels like 3.5 years ago. It's got to be at least 3 years ago that they were going to do a sequel to the Joker. I was one of the guys that said that the original Joker movie from 2019 didn't even need a sequel because it was a very well done, self-contained story, borrowing a lot from Martin Scorsese films. And the sequel to Joker could have been whatever version of Batman you like, even one that you make up in your own head. But then the story came out that the Joker sequel was going to be a musical. And a lot of people who are just like me, who aren't really big into musicals, were thinking, well, is this going to be any good? How can this actually be good? And at the time, I actually was way more optimistic about it purely because of the quality of the first Joker movie. My thought process at the time was Todd Phillips is a great filmmaker, and he's obviously figured out how to make a movie with the first Joker. So if he's going to do a sequel that's going to be a different genre, slightly different genre, I trusted him. I trusted him, and I trusted Joaquin Phoenix's performance as Arthur, aka Joker. Now, understand that this is one of those cases where, as a fan, you really have no reason to distrust the filmmaker because, he did good the first time, and both the filmmaker and the actor did a phenomenal job. So even if you change genres, the way I sort of justified it in my own head is that it was going to be kind of like a dark comedy type of musical. So I thought it was going to be sort of Joker making fun of other musicals. Joker and Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn making fun of other musicals, making them about mental, problems or murder or whatever, right? And so I go into this film and I'm thinking, okay, it's probably going to be goofy, probably going to be a satire of other, musicals. That was my cope, I guess you can say, or what I thought I was going to see out of Joker 2. Man, this movie is not getting well reviewed by any stretch of the imagination, but even people who are my friends, were telling me, yo, this is actually bad. But still, I didn't cancel my showing. I said I'm going to go see it and judge for myself. Because even though I trusted them, I want to still see it for myself because, again, I was so impressed with that first movie. Let's not forget, guys, when the Joker movie was first announced, if you remember, because rather than me to made fun of it back then, a lot of folks thought it was weird that you were going to get a Joker from the Suicide Squad movie, as well as a standalone Joker, as well as maybe even a Joker from another Batman universe, because there was a lot of ideas. There was supposed to be one with, I remember, Daniel Radcliffe was supposed to be in a Joker project, like an origin story or something. And it became a joke, and then no pun intended, then the movie comes out and it's really good. So I didn't want to go into this one assuming it would be bad. And I went into it fairly, and now that I've seen it, I have a very nuanced opinion about this movie. I'm not going to go into spoilers, okay? I'm just going to say this. I think a lot of people's opinion about this movie is going to come down to either the last 15, 20 minutes, because the ending, while I have about two different ideas about what they were going for, people are going to come up with all kinds of theories, and the movie does have that same sort of concept that the first one had, where you have scenes of events happening that you're not sure if they're in Arthur's head or if they're actually happening. And the movie does that a few times. However, there are other scenes where you know damn well it doesn't make any sense and it's not happening. For example, there's a scene where Arthur and Harley are doing what I would consider like a parody of Sonny and Cher. And they're on a stage. And that's obviously in his head. And that's all being done to kind of weave this story of him getting close to her and their relationship. Now, what I will tell you is I feel like even though the movie's promoted as being a Joker and Harley Quinn film, and there are multiple songs in the movie because it is a musical, first of all, the music is not original music like made for this movie. They're older songs that were not made for this movie, but they were done to either play up Arthur's fantasies or to connect the two characters. But Harley's character in this movie is, I think, very, very underwritten. I feel like it's poorly developed. I understand what they were going for, and they sort of, in a way, kind of made her, in a way, a replacement to what Arthur's mother was in his life, and a replacement to what the girl was in his apartment complex, right? In some ways. But in other ways, she comes off just, you're not sure how to feel about her. But I did feel like the character was very underwritten, and the movie isn't really about her and Joker. It's really just about Arthur. Now, also, the big chunk of this movie is a courtroom drama because Arthur's in court for the crimes he committed in the first Joker film. This movie's 2 years after the first Joker, so obviously you shouldn't be expecting Batman to appear just yet, although there are other characters from the Batman world that do appear in this movie. It's not really trying to shoehorn too much into this and throw a lot of different characters in. It's not like a lot, just one or two. Now, while the movie does show flashes of brilliance, I don't hate this movie. I really don't. I genuinely do not hate this movie, but I don't love it either. I think there's a lot of things that, there are flashes of brilliance in this movie. There are moments, there are awkward, powerful scenes, there's great performance moments from Joaquin Phoenix. It really feels like they had no idea what they were doing, and they didn't know what kind of movie to make. When you see the first Joker, like I mentioned, it's a Scorsese film. Two of them, in fact, put together into one. This movie feels like maybe 4 or 5 different movies, and they weren't really sure which way to go with it. And also, one of the problems that I know this film's going to get criticized for is that in some ways, it undermines the previous film. In some ways, what they established in the first movie, and let me go into this real quick, it does carry over sort of the analysis of mental health and people who are mentally ill and why they do the things they do, and, you know, the importance of seeing that in the past, the society as a whole has not been too kind to people with mental illness. They go in that direction here, or they try to, although it wasn't anywhere near as compelling as the first movie. In some ways, based on, again, the last 15 minutes, because I think most people who love the first movie and what it was trying to do are probably going to hate this movie because of what they do near the end with the character of Arthur Fleck. At the same time, though, I know there's going to be people out there who are going to view it as like a brilliant ending because it's sort of, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there are concepts from The Dark Knight, like, for example, and from that Batman Begins, the idea of Joker being more of a symbol, right? What Joker symbolizes ends up being more powerful than Arthur himself. That sort of is, I think, something they were going for, and I think that people who are really into artsy movies are going to say that because this movie really tried hard to be artsy. Like, this movie, you could tell it's an art house type of film. Like, it is not a superhero movie or supervillain movie in any way, and it tries to maybe spring off the first movie, but it never comes even close to reaching the heights of that first movie, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 scenes here and there that come a little bit close because there are some twists where the movie does kind of keep you guessing, and I did like that. But in some ways, when I'm watching it, it felt like Todd Phillips maybe thought that the portrayal of Joker in the first movie gave people the wrong impression of the character or of what he wanted. And in a way, I mentioned the whole thing about Joker being a symbol, and that there are obviously fans of what Joker did in that movie. You know, degenerates, people who are, you know, in some ways very sick. Like, this movie does callbacks to that, and at one point in the movie, actually, I thought it was well done, but then the very next scene just completely just takes a dump on it. This movie felt like they were, you know, one of the themes of the movie is that Harley tells Joker, her name's Lee in the movie mostly, that we're going to build a mountain together, right? And this movie felt like they were building a mountain and they just destroyed it before they finished it. There's actually one scene in particular near the end where a character appears in a certain location. There's no way for that character to have known that another character was going to be there. It was too convenient. And at one point, I thought that maybe that was all in Arthur's head. Turns out that it wasn't. But there's also the interpretation that maybe the whole movie may have been in his head. I don't buy that. I do not buy that. But I know there's going to be some people that are going to talk about it. This movie felt like a movie that I think Todd Phillips made purposely to get people talking as opposed to making a good movie. It felt like he was doing... Remember when Last Jedi came out and that clip surfaced of young Rian Johnson saying, I want to make a movie that's loved or hated because it's more interesting than just having a movie everybody loves and everybody hates? I almost feel like Todd Phillips borrowed some of that here because he almost undermines himself. And then when you look at the fact that the script, oftentimes when they were shooting the movie, was just thrown away, you can see that here. You can see it. I will say this. This movie does have some things going for it. Some of it's very compelling. There was a lot of very compelling scenes, and it has a great look, and it definitely did not bore me. I thought I would be bored by all the musical interludes, and I wasn't. I actually was not. But it doesn't come anywhere near capturing the first movie. And I think some folks are going to tell you that it may actually have hurt the first movie. I don't know about that, because the difference between Last Jedi and Force Awakens is that Last Jedi was the 8th movie in a franchise, and Force Awakens was made to be the beginning of a trilogy. Whereas the 2019 Joker was not meant to be the beginning of a trilogy at all. It was just meant to be a story of an idea of an interpretation of a character that's maybe the most famous comic book villain of all time, just a new way of looking at him. This movie brought back some familiar elements from the Batman universe and still tried to go in that direction, but then it almost just undermined itself by the end. I can see a lot of people hating this movie. So my final thoughts are this. Should you go see this movie? I don't think you should go see it. I really don't. I think you should save your money or go see something else. Maybe Beetlejuice again, because that was more fun. I think if it comes, or when it comes out on streaming, when it comes out on Max, if you like the first film, and if I've said enough things to keep you curious at least, I think that might be the best place to go. I think it's worth watching on streaming. I don't think it's worth going out there and paying your hard-earned money to see, because I think the risk of you walking away from it pissed off. In other words, let me break it down like this. This is my honest opinion. I think 80% of people are going to not like what they did here, and I think 20% of them are going to think it was freaking brilliant. And I know that there are just some movies that are like that. Sometimes it's the other way around, where 80% love it, 20% hate it. But if you were to say, Danny, should I part with my money on this one? I'm going to say no. Wait for streaming and then decide. There's no sequences in this movie that I thought need to be seen on the big screen. It wasn't like a big, CGI, big budget action film. It wasn't like a Mission Impossible or Godzilla -1 or any of that. That wasn't the purpose of this. It is a methodical movie. It's a thought-provoking movie for sure. It had me thinking, but it wasn't as interesting as the ideas they had in the first one. So that's about as nuanced as it gets, man. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. It does not hurt the first movie to me, because even if you hate this movie, the first one will always exist. in and of itself. And it's still a brilliant movie. But factoring this in there, it should have never been made. If it were up to me, it should have never been made. Those are my thoughts. What did you think? Let me know.